I love what Doug said about different angles that this data provides. I always talk about it in terms of 4 Ps, and this is something I made up. Building permit data can tell you a lot about people, a lot about properties, projects, and places. So when we talk about people, we talk about contractors that are doing the job. We're also talking about owners, applicants, engineers, designers, and so forth. Places. You can take permit data and you can analyze in a particular jurisdiction, let's say Los Angeles, how long does it take to pull an EV charger permit, and how long does it take to final it? Is it similar to timelines in New York or Austin? So we're talking about, in a given place, jurisdiction performance in general. Of course, permit data, it tells you a lot on the history of a given property, all the changes that were done to it ever since it was built. And lastly, projects. We can analyze electrification projects in terms of cost across the country and compare. And we can say, here's a specific zip code where solar permits are booming. Ryan, myself, and Doug, we're approaching this building permit data ecosystem from all different angles. And as we are uncovering data challenges, again, they're specific to those 4 different angles. Ryan actually focuses on the contractor standardization. And I was like, thank goodness, please take that part because it's such a huge data set. And I'm so happy that him and Doug are addressing that problem while we focus on the basics, pretty much. We mentioned ChatGPT, and I can give so many examples of why it just gets confused and doesn't understand different terms. For example, SD can stand for single dwelling or secondary dwelling. And they are very different, right? And depending on which jurisdiction we're looking at the data from, it means one thing or another. There are other abbreviations that we found. For example, WTF. What do you think it stands for? It stands for Wireless Transmission Facility. Who would know, right?
I'm going to start telling my kid that's what that means every time I say that.
You should. So essentially, we had to build our own language model to process this data and understand it.
So Ryan, they've hit on a couple of things, and you're feeding the data to Kat, but you're after a particular different piece. What are some of the guiding principles for you?
Yeah, we actually we take Kat's data. She'll feed us nationwide building permits in this compressed JSON format, and we've spent the last many months pipelining that, and in order to do just what I describe it as the last little bits of fits and finish and polish. You could almost think of this as like the Pareto principle in action, where if Cat and team, Cat gets us 80 to 90% of the way, getting that last 10 to 20% of polish takes like 80 to 90% of the effort, because it's hard to get all the data types correct and get this data, like finesse it, massage it to a point where we can actually load it into a kind of a database, where if one field, like one value in 100 million records is not typed correctly, like it was expecting an integer and we got a string, then the whole thing blows up and we basically have to start all over. It's a lot of work dealing with addresses, and then as Kat mentioned, also dealing with the contractor information, which is also prone to have typos, is incomplete at best. We'll often have like a bunch of different addresses. We'll see typos in the license numbers. So going to all the states, trying to find a source of truth, and then collect the contractor data from each permit, try to match it to a record in that state contractor set, while also being aware that contractors can work across states. So it's like we can't just confine the deduplication methodology to a single state. We got to look across states and be able to map those, because people might want that sort of nationwide roll-up. It's a weird data problem, and then finally connecting those contractors back to the permits themselves and doing these roll-up metrics, like how many permits did you do in the last 60 days? What type of permits were they? What kind of inspection data can we tease out of those permits? So we look at things like an inspection pass rate on a contractor, and also the duration, like Kat mentioned, permit issued or filed to permit issued. We can also look at permit issued to permit finalized, and then understand, does one contractor for the same type of project or installing the same type of unit, HVAC unit or whatever, are they taking significantly longer than someone else doing that installation on the same kind of house in the same zip code? There's like a lot of different ways we can slice and dice and look at this, and it's a pretty fun data problem. So that's why, like, we're not even touching the interface. And when Doug and I connected, I was also like, okay, cool, because we have our hands full dealing with all of this. And if you want to build the Zoom info kind of layer on top of it, by all means, like, someone needs to do it.
So now I'm starting to get this. See, I told you guys this was Doug's idea, so I just get to learn and be on the side here. So Kat, you're going out to all the sources and grabbing it and cleaning it, passing it to Ryan. Ryan, you're doing that last 10 to 20% to connect some dots, which, by the way, to anybody listening, I just had this thought, is that, like, a lot of the reputation in the world is let's be honest. I love a good story, and every cliff I jump off of gets 5 feet taller every time I tell that story. And I think every contractor, the permit time goes down, and the completion time goes down each time we tell the story. So this is starting to build. By the way, the data is starting to build reality, and these are all things that you cannot control, contractors, by any other way than how you perform.
Right.
And so this is kind of cool because it's performance metrics, and then. Now Ryan's done with it, or at least Ryan's doing his thing with it. And Doug, now you're doing something else with it. And this kind of is interesting. So Kat gets the source. Ryan is taking that source to another 20, but then Doug, you're taking that and more data, aren't you?
Not currently from Kat and Ryan, right? We've got our own sources, but similar data.
Maybe eventually, we'll see.
Maybe eventually. That's the fingers crossed.
Connect the dots all together.
We're working on it together, yeah. But it's the right idea. It's similar data. Can't say the same. It's similar data, permits, licensed contractors, and then adding in more of the holistic company profile. Where do I find you online? Your LinkedIn, your Facebook, all of the people that I can find to get a hold of, their emails or phone numbers. And so, yeah, it layers it all in together with an online portal.